Welcome to the fourth season of Murder in 20 podcast, where I, Bobby Stevens, am your host with a new episode every Wednesday. If you're a serious fan of true crime and love listening to podcasts, but don't want all that small talk, you've come to the right place. We get right to the facts. Murder in 20 episodes are concise and complete in 20 minutes. Less talk and more true crime. Be sure to like, share, and follow us to learn about upcoming episodes every Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's get to this week's episode. Located just a half hour from Lake Michigan is a small town of Niles. Over the last 100 years, the population has never really changed, hovering around 12,000. 2 Amtrak rail lines run through Niles. The old Michigan Central Station was featured in films such as Midnight Run and The Continental Divide. Rebecca Stowe, who went by the name Becky, grew up in Niles and was a tomboy at heart. She enjoyed the outdoors with her family and summers at the lake. At 5'6", she enjoyed playing baseball and basketball. But Becky wasn't part of the in crowd. Rather, she was a rebel, independent and adventurous, with a bit of a wild side. Her mother, Diana, was a single mother, and Becky's older sister, who was 11 years older, had left home, so Becky often found herself on her own. When her mother's boyfriend Steve moved in, he tried to assume a fatherly role with Becky. She didn't want his advice and didn't appreciate his rules, and they often argued. In the early 90s, Robert Lehman, who was the year ahead of Becky, was one of the school's football heroes. A clean-cut, tall, good-looking 16-year-old with short, dark hair. He was part of the popular crowd, and Becky, like a lot of girls, had a crush on Rob. Becky had just completed her freshman year at Brandywine Middle Senior High, and being the rebel that she was, smoked a pack a day of menthol cigarettes. Now 15, her dark brown curly hair was cut in a short bob just below the ears. Black eyeliner and thick mascara framed her hazel eyes. In the summer of 1993, Rob's girlfriend Angela Snyder went to New York for the summer, and Rob was looking for her summer fling. Becky unknowingly filled that need. Over the moon that Rob was interested in her, Becky was quick to fall in love. She considered herself his new girlfriend, and Rob was her first boyfriend. But to Rob, it was just a casual thing. He offhandedly mentioned to those around him that he'd ventured to the other side of the tracks and inferred he was dating someone beneath him. Their relationship moved quickly, and soon their makeout sessions led to something more. TV's episode of Buried in the Backyard details how every time the couple were intimate, Becky recorded it with a star in her calendar. Within a short time, there were 6 stars. Then it happened. The thing teenage girls fear and think will never happen to them. Becky went to Kmart and bought a pregnancy test. Then she and her best friend Jackie went to Burger King. That is when Becky learned she was pregnant. Independent and trying to figure things out on her own, she didn't confide in her mother. She told Rob, but at 16 he wasn't ready to be a father and encouraged Becky to get an abortion. She thought about it and considered it, but then decided it wasn't right for her and told Rob no. He panicked. He just knew he couldn't tell his parents and disappoint them. It was a sunny summer afternoon on July 12th. Janet Jackson's That's the Way Love Goes had been in the top of the Billboard all summer. At this moment in Becky's life, the lyrics seemed rather poignant. Like a moth to a flame, burned by the fire, My love is blind. Rob had been thinking long and hard about his situation and couldn't bear to tell his parents. He came up with a plan. Drove out to his uncle's farm on acreage in a rural area on Jefferson Center Street, a place where he'd had many parties over the years. Driving past the cornfields and onto the property and up to the tree line at the edge of Grey Lake, he handed his cousin Gary a shovel, and the two dug a shallow hole. Gary had a learning disability and happened to be spending time with his popular cousin, whom he admired, and didn't mind a little hard labor. As they finished up, Rob left the shovel on the ground. He'd be needing it later. At home, Becky and Steve got into another argument. She asked her mother if she could stay at Jackie's house for a few days until the tension died down, and Diana agreed. The next day, Jackie's boyfriend Todd arrived, and the couple left for a few hours. Meanwhile, Rob wanted to see Becky. Skipping his job as a busboy at a restaurant, he had a friend clock in for him. Becky hopped in the shower, then quickly scribbled a note for Jackie that she was going to meet Rob. She wouldn't be gone long, so she left behind her wallet, cash, and cigarettes. Rob drove Becky out to his uncle's farm. While we don't know exactly what happened in those next few moments, this is what prosecutors envisioned. Rob parked about 75 feet from the lake and suggested they go for a walk. As they neared the freshly dug hole, Rob pointed it out to Becky, telling her, "Do you understand how serious I am about you getting an abortion?" But Becky fought back and bit him on the arm. He got angry, put his hands around her neck, and squeezed. It took a good 3 to 4 minutes of constant pressure before Becky lost consciousness. He rolled her into the hole and picked up the shovel. Becky laid still as the dirt slowly covered her body, her heart still beating. When Jackie and Todd returned home, the bathroom mirror was still foggy from Becky's shower. Then they saw her cigarettes and wallet and her note. An hour later, the phone rang. It was Rob looking for Becky. Jackie said, "We thought she was with you." Rob insisted he hadn't seen her. Jackie started calling their friends, looking for Becky. She called her mother Diana, who raced over. They immediately began driving around town. Diana had a bad feeling. Although Becky sometimes left for a few hours to cool off, this was different. She'd left everything she owned behind. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Police immediately began interviewing those close to Becky and learned from Jackie that she was pregnant. Investigators then went to speak with Rob, but his alibi that he'd been with his cousin Gary and hung out with his mom, then went to his job, all checked out. Still, just to make sure, they asked Rob to take a polygraph. Not surprisingly, he passed. This often happens with a psychopath because their brains are wired differently, and they are unaffected by the truth. To them, the lie detector is a game, and they're out to win. Police at this point determined Rob wasn't their guy. Then they discovered the volatile relationship between Becky and her stepfather Steve, and discovered that Steve had taken a sick day off work the day Becky disappeared. They interviewed Steve and asked him to take a polygraph, and T agreed. But later, Steve's lawyer contacted police to say he would no longer be cooperating. This gave investigators pause to consider Steve a suspect. Steve told Diana that he thought Becky's friends were lying and knew more than what they were telling police. Diana didn't want to leave the house in case Becky called. So on the rare occasion she ventured out looking for her daughter, she left a message for her on the answering machine. "This is for you, Becky. No matter how tough life seems to be, you can always come home to me, because I love you." Diana plastered the area with missing posters and searched abandoned houses. One day, she showed up at Jackie's boyfriend Todd's house and demanded to look in the trunk of his car and his basement. With no judgment, Todd understood her desperation and let her in. Police put together a team of officers over 20 times in search for Becky, even using cadaver dogs. 3 months after Becky's disappearance, Steve disappeared too. Diana came home one day to find all his stuff gone. Investigators wondered, if he was innocent, why did he run? On November 3rd, Becky's family and friends gathered for her 16th birthday. Then Christmas rolled around. Becky's presents sat under the tree, waiting for her to come home. Rob and his friends continued to party at his uncle's property, and he and Angela resumed dating. Then in the spring of 1994, while sitting in a parking lot, Angela asked Rob if he knew where Becky was. He confessed to Angela that after Becky had told him she was pregnant, he panicked and killed her. But he claimed he blacked out, and when he came to, she was dead, and that it was an accident. Angela kept his dark secret, held it close to her chest, and smothered it so it couldn't escape. In July, on the first anniversary of Becky's disappearance, a sign was erected in front of Becky's home that stated, "Becky Stowe vanished," and listed a reward and phone numbers. Becky's family vowed to never stop looking for her. That November, Becky had been missing for 16 months. Her friends and family gathered at Diana's for her 17th birthday. Green was Becky's favorite color. They lit green candles and released green balloons into the night sky. Diana was desperate and contacted a number of psychics. They all said the same thing, that Becky was dead. Police in Niles had never used a psychic before, but after a year and a half of no tips, they also consulted with a psychic that other law enforcement agencies had used. The psychic indicated that Becky would be found near an industrial area, near water, and railroad tracks. By the summer of 1995, Becky's case had gone cold. Perhaps it was the second anniversary, and Diana's vow to never give up, that had Angela reflecting on what she knew. Or perhaps it was because Rob was drinking more, and she had come to fear him. In October, Angela finally cracked open the vault where she'd kept his secret and shared it with her parents. They immediately contacted the Cass County Sheriff's Office. Angela was very specific, telling them where Becky's remains could be found. It was a cold fall morning when investigators arrived at the farm with a search warrant. Gary cooperated and took them to where he and Rob had dug a hole almost 2.5 years earlier, on the edge of Gray Lake, a mile from the railroad tracks. Carefully, they removed each log on the wood pile. But when the daylight started to fade and they still hadn't found her, they brought in a backhoe. The bucket gingerly scooped away 2 inches of dirt at a time. After only a couple scoops, a faded piece of red clothing appeared amongst the dirt. They could see a thigh and pelvic bones. Officers stopped and gathered around Becky's grave and offered a prayer. Rob was now their prime suspect, and they were a little surprised when he agreed to speak with them. Then Rob, without hesitation or being prompted, confessed. But he claimed they were playing around and wrestling. When he wrapped his arms around her, she responded by biting him, and that angered him. So he braced his arms and then twisted them. Becky went limp, and he thought he'd broken her neck. Then he panicked, rolled her body into the hole, and got out of there. Rob then admitted to killing Becky because she was pregnant, and he didn't want to tell his family. The Herald Palladium reported that when investigators asked why he chose to not use a weapon, Rob replied, "I didn't want to see the blood. It was with my hands or none at all." Dental records confirmed the remains for Becky, and an autopsy was performed. A forensic pathologist found no evidence of a broken neck and no fractures or puncture wounds. The official determination was death by homicide, and cause of death was strangulation. Rob was charged with murder and held without bond. He pled innocent. 2 years later, in October 1997, Rob was tried as an adult. It took the jury only 5 hours to find him guilty of first-degree murder and premeditated murder. He remained seated, his face stone cold. Rob was sentenced to mandatory life without the possibility of parole. However, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that because juvenile brains are not fully developed to make adult decisions, that automatic life without parole sentences for juveniles was unconstitutional. In 2020, Michigan officials re-examined Rob's case, and he was resentenced, which made him eligible for parole. In 2021, after he served 26 years, Rob was paroled at the age of 44. Although he was released with conditions, he was permitted to live within 20 minutes of Becky's sister. Diana never recovered from losing Becky, and when she passed away in 2015, she was cremated and her ashes laid to rest on Becky's grave. Thanks for listening to Murder in 20 with less talk and more true crime. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday for the episode of Susan Tice and Aaron Gilmore. It had been 37 years since the two women were murdered, months apart. Using genetic genealogy, the Toronto Cold Case Unit set out to find their killers, and were shocked when DNA linked their murders to one killer. If you're dying to hear more, past episodes of Murder in 20 are available for free at murderin20.com and on all major podcast platforms. We love what we do and are dying to continue. If you enjoy listening to Murder in 20 every week, we'd be eternally grateful for your support by visiting Murder in 20 at Patreon, PayPal, or murderin20.com. We'd like to acknowledge Purple Planet for use of their music, sound effect from Vaseline Studios and Quick Sounds, and our many editorial sources who are listed on our website. Be sure to like, share, and follow us to learn about upcoming episodes every Wednesday. Stay safe, sleep with the lights on, and don't play with strangers.